on mine, I have some other projects for different clients and stuff that I work with. You guys probably won't see this stuff, so don't worry about seeing other things here. We're going to go up to New File. So go ahead and click on New File. It'll give you a bunch of presets here, and then it has some options for like mobile, web, print, film and video, that kind of stuff. Go ahead and click on, actually, no, we're not going to click on any of those. We're just going to do it manually. So project details, under the name here, I'm highlighting where I think for me it's automatically Untitled 1. And I'm going to title this, you can title it Project 1 or Labyrinths. I'm just titling mine Labyrinths. Under width, you may, depending on the default settings you're seeing, you may see it as inches or pixels or a number of other things. I'm going to click on this drop-down menu here, and I'm going to change where it says pixels. I'm going to change it to inches. Okay? And then it changes the dimensions. Right now, what it's set up on mine is like 26.6 inches wide and 15 inches high. Well, we don't want that for this project, so I'm going to change this to width. It's going to be 11 inches. And the height is going to be 17 inches. All right, everybody good so far? Everybody with me? Okay. Under artboards, we're going to do 2 artboards. Okay, and then you can scroll down a little bit, some more settings. If you don't see the more settings, they might be under where it says Advanced Options. So I'm clicking on Advanced Options. For this, we're not going to be printing. We're just going to be looking at the digital files. So where it says Color Mode, make sure it's selected on RGB color. It's either RGB or CMYK. You're going to select RGB. And then under raster effects, you're going to put screen, which is 72 ppi, points per inch. And everybody with me so far? Okay, and then press create. And it's going to bring up something like this. Okay, so you're going to see these are your 2 artboards. This is tabloid size, 11 by 17. This is when I say artboard, it's the area where the design, the work is going to be going. If you export the artboards as, with whatever you have on them, that's what is going to be seen in your exported image file, okay? So we're working with these 2 here. We're going to be making 2 labyrinths. One is rectangle and one is a circle. And so that's why we have the 2 artboards. Over here, and again, your screen might look a little different than mine. Actually, I need to move this one over a bit. Looks like it's a little squished on the projector. Okay, so you'll see different tools, different settings on left and right hand side. So on this little box at the top right, that kind of looks like almost like a little microwave type thing. Right now I have it's on Essentials Classic. This is the work view. It's probably on that for all of you. If it's not set on Essentials Classic, I would go ahead and click on that so that we're all kind of viewing it the closest possible version of the workspace. And then on the right-hand side, so here's a bunch of different tabs for a lot of different tools. Go ahead and look for one that kind of looks like 2 squares stacked on top of each other. And if you hover over it, it'll say Layers. If I click on that, this is my Layers tab. Okay? So right now I have 1 layer. Layers are a key feature in just about every single Adobe product, because that's how we start building up complexity. Whether it's a photograph or an illustration, or it's a video file that you're editing, or even audio, we start building pieces on top of each other so we can have different levels of complexity happening with different shapes or colors or gradients or textures, all these type of things that get us to a final product. We have to kind of think about them almost like how they stacked on top of each other to create a whole image, okay? So right now we don't have anything, it's just one layer and there's nothing on it, it's just two blank artboards. We're gonna just do a little experimentation with some tools and stuff, just starting out. So over here on the tools side, if you hover over some of these, they very conveniently will tell you what they are. If I hover over it's paintbrush tool, or if I hover over this, it's rectangle tool. I hover over this, it's the pen tool. The other thing to keep in mind is if you look at the bottom right of each tool, if there's a little tiny triangle at the bottom right, that means there's more related tools underneath that. So if I click and hold down, I clicked and held down on the type tool, and underneath the type tool I have area type tool, type on the path tool, vertical type tool, etc. If I accidentally clicked and put some type there, I'm gonna delete that. If I do the same thing over the rectangle tool, click and hold down, I can see rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, flare. Right now, go ahead and select the rectangle tool. So click on the rectangle tool. Once you're selected on it, come over to your artboards and click and drag and let go. And you've just made your first shape. All right, I know, super simple, but we're learning the fundamental building blocks of how we start building things with shapes and lines and such, okay? So I just made a rectangle. I can click on the rectangle. I can move it around. Notice you'll see the little squares on the corners and the edges. If I put my cursor over one of them and if I get it close and it gives a curved arrow, that's the rotate, so I can click there and rotate it. And Command Z undoes an action. If I hover directly over that square, then I can resize it. I can click and hold and resize the object, okay? Any questions so far? All right. And so I'm seeing on some of your screens, some of your squares are solid and some of them are just a square line. We can change that and with the fill and stroke options, this is where you also change the color. So right now, I'm just going to look up at the top here right now for fill. It's just solid black, and then for stroke, it has a little red line through it. That means there is no stroke, and then that corresponds to what I see down here under my tools. But you'll notice down here, the one with the red line, it's in front of the black square that's showing what my fill color is. I can click on the black square and it will be on front. So then I can double click on the fill color square, and then a color picker pops up and I can change the color here, okay? So I just change it to a red square. Let's change it to green for UAB. Okay. Now also, let's say I don't want a solid rectangle. Say I want an outline. This little button here between the two, if I hover over it, it says swap, fill, and stroke. If I click on that, now all of a sudden I have, it's very, almost imperceptible on the projector, a very, very thin rectangle stroke that is the same green that I used before because I just swapped them. If I click on it, it'd come up here where it says stroke, and then beside stroke it says, right now for me it says 1 point. I can change that to make it thicker. So if I press the up arrow, I'm just clicking on that. We're going 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, so on. And I'm just getting thicker and thicker. The stroke is getting thicker. I can also just type in a number. Let's say a 100-point stroke. All right, real thick rectangle, okay? And then let's say I don't like this type of rectangle. I want it to go back to a solid. I can come back here to swap again, and I can press that, and now it's back to a solid rectangle, all right? Okay, now the same can be done underneath the rectangle tool. Remember, if you click and hold down, you can see the other tools underneath it. Go ahead and click on the Ellipse tool. So you might have to hold down and drag it while you're holding, and then click on Ellipse. And then I can do the same thing. I can make an ellipse by clicking and dragging. But I just, I'm kind of eyeballing it, like, oh, it kind of looks like a circle, but it's not exactly a circle. How do I get a perfect circle? You can hold down Shift and then click and drag, and it will scale a perfect circle. It will also do something similar if I go back to the rectangle tool, and if I do the same thing, holding down Shift and dragging, it will make a perfect square. Okay? Any questions so far? All right. Let's say I don't like any of these shapes I've just made. I want to delete them all. I can, in the open area, so I click back on Selection Tool, which is also keyboard shortcut, which is V. So if you either just press V on your keyboard, or you can come over here, the top left is Selection Tool. And then in the open area, if I click on a shape, then it will, click and I start dragging, it will move the shape. If I click off the shape, and then I'm holding down and I'm dragging the cursor over, and a little selection square is dragging itself over all the shapes I just made. And I let go. Now it's just selected all of them. Then I can press Delete on my keyboard, and it gets rid of everything I just made. Okay? A couple more things back in talking about layers again. I'm going to make a couple different shapes. Just bear with me real quick. I'm going to make one that's orange. Make one more that's kind of magenta. All right, so now I have 3 different color shapes. If I come back over here, click on that Layers tab, which is the 2 squares that look like they're stacked on top of each other. It kind of gives me a little preview of what is on layer 1. And then I have a little arrow to the left of it I can toggle down, and I can see the different files that are in that layer or on that layer. And beside all of them, there's a little eyeball. If I click on the eyeball that's beside the whole layer, layer 1, if I turn it off, I don't see anything. It's, we're turning off the visibility for that layer. So I'm clicking again, turning it back on. If I do that for one of these shapes, I can turn on and off the visibility for a specific shape. And it's still there. I'm not deleting it, but I'm just not seeing it. So if I turn off the visibility, okay? All right, so I'm going to kind of stack some of these up real quick. And notice, these are three separate shapes. When I drag the orange square over the green one, why does it look like the orange square is covering the green rectangle? Like, why is it not the green rectangle covering the orange? Like, why is it choosing to be that way? And if I do the same thing with the magenta, it's like it's covering all the two below it. It's because it organizes layers from top to bottom, or objects and layers from top to bottom over here in the Layers tab. So you can see the magenta shape is above the orange rectangle, which is above the green shape. Now, if I click on the green rectangle here in the Layers tab, I click and drag it up. So you see I'm dragging it up, and it's kind of, this little blue line is kind of snapping above each one. So now I'm going to drag it above the magenta, and I let go. Now I've just dragged in the Layers tab, the green rectangle is above the magenta and orange. So now it shows up on my artboard as being above magenta and orange, okay? Yeah?
Can you do that again?
Yes. All right, so for instance, right now what's showing up on the bottom is the orange rectangle. So if I click on it and drag it up, and as I'm dragging it, it has this little tiny, almost like a little hand that's holding it, and I'm moving my cursor up until I get this blue line that's snapping above the green rectangle. And if I let go, now I've just dragged and dropped basically the orange rectangle above the green and magenta. And now it's covering, it looks like it's on top of the other two rectangles, okay? Is that good? Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and toggle the little arrow to left of layer 1 so we don't see all the objects on layer 1. We can do the same thing for having a second layer, which can help with your organization, which, trust me, is going to come in handy. So if I come down to the bottom of this little window, and there's a little square with a plus sign in it, if I hover over it, it says Create New Layer. Click on that little button, Create New Layer, and now I have what popped up, Layer 2. So Layer 2, the little icon beside it is white because the artboard is white and there's nothing on it. Yeah, we just made this brand new layer. There's nothing on this layer. If I make another shape, let's say I'm going to make some more circles. If I'm selected on layer 2, now notice this can be tricky sometimes because you might make a shape and you might accidentally be selected on layer 1, and it will, whatever layer you're selected on, it will put that new shape on that layer. So if you want it to be on layer 2, you have to make sure it's selected on layer 2, which is what I did. Also, it can be helpful. If I click on, I'm selecting layer 2, I have a little red box that's beside it. And then if I click layer 1, and I click on an object over here that was made on layer 1, you see it's a little blue box. This is just kind of showing you, if you click on these different shapes, this bounding box, this one is red, this one is blue. I know it's kind of hard to see on the projector. You can kind of see it when I click on the green rectangle. And so that way I know if I click on that and it corresponds with the blue dot, which is layer 1, then I know it's on layer 1. All right, but I made this circle on layer 2. And I'm going to change the color. I have a different color now. We'll do blue. And so right now it's on the second artboard, but if I move it over to the first artboard, it's above all the others. Because even though it's on its own layer, that whole layer, layer 2, is above layer 1. Okay? So this blue ellipse is on layer 2, and layer 2 is above layer 1. Now, just like I did with the files, or the objects on layer 1, I can click on layer 1 and drag it above layer 2. So it's just titled layer 1 and 2. I mean, you can title them anything you want. You can rename them. So if I drag layer 1 above layer 2, now that blue ellipse is behind everything that is on layer 1. Okay? So I'm going to drag layer 1 back down. And so now those objects in layer 1 are below layer 2 blue ellipse. Okay. Everyone along? Great. A couple other things on what I like to do is press Command plus or minus to zoom in or out. You can also do it on my laptop. I have the kind of mouse pad or touchpad, I mean, and if I can use my 2 fingers to zoom in or out. I think with on the mice you have, I believe scrolling on the wheel might zoom in or out. No, it goes up or down. Okay, so then keep in mind Command plus or minus. So hold down Command and then press plus or minus. That can zoom in or out. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. We're going to go over grids, guides, and rulers. So right now, this is basically a blank white piece of paper, and I'm putting these objects, I can move them around any which way I want. But, we have lined paper for a reason. Let's say we want to, organize and kind of perfectly measure out where objects or text or something where we want them to go on the page. Well, we can do this by setting up and using the grids, guides, and rulers. So first off, and I don't have it on mine, I'm not sure, you probably already have the ruler set up on yours, but if you press Command R, hold down the Command and press R, and I'm just pressing R off and on, and you'll see the rulers pop up. So press Command R, and then we know each of these artboards is 11 inches wide, so I'm zooming in, and you can see it starts. I'm going to just kind of scroll up here. So on the rulers at the top, the edge of this artboard starts at 0, and it goes to 11 right here. So we know these are 11 inches. And then there's a little bit of a gap between the next one. It starts at around, well, it's a little more than 11 and 11 and a quarter, so it's not exact, but then it's 11 inches past that point, so a little more than 22. Okay, and same thing on the left-hand side. Scroll down, and the bottom will align with 17 because it's 17 inches in height. Okay. So then, to make guides, you can only make guides when you have the rulers on. Click on the ruler area, either the left side or the top, and click and hold and drag down, and you'll notice a guide, a little line coming down. And you can line it up with, let's say I'm going to line it up with the 4th inch mark on the left-hand side, so I know it's 4 inches from the top, and I let go, and I'll have this blue line that goes across my whole screen. All right, so this is a guide. I've just made a guide. I can do the same thing. So I know it's 17 inches long, so 4 inches from the bottom, 17 minus 4 is 13. So I'm going to make the next one. I'm clicking and dragging it down, and I'm going to align it with 13. All right, so now there's 4 inches, 4 inches, and 9 inches in between. I'm going to do the same thing from the left-hand side to make a vertical guide. I'm just going to put this at the 2-inch mark, and 11, so it'll be at 9 inches. So, you know, I'm just choosing arbitrary, points, numbers to put these guides on. We're not using them for any reason with like the shapes that we've just made. But let's say I want to, line up some of these shapes on a certain edge, a certain guide. So I can also go ahead and come up and press the view, which I actually cannot see on the projector. It's cut off, which is unfortunate. So on the top of your screen, you'll see like File, Edit, Object, Type, Select, which is just off of my screen. But under View, I can come down, and right now I have Smart Guides selected. There's a little check mark for Smart Guides. Go ahead and make sure Smart Guides is selected. What that does is, as you see I'm moving around, see the little kind of purple, magenta-ish lines that are kind of popping up and going away depending on where I'm moving this object? It's because it's trying to figure out where do you want to line this up with. Like right now, I have it kind of close to the green square, and there's this little line pops up from the middle of the green rectangle to the magenta rectangle, and it's basically saying, all right, right here is they're lined up perfectly centered, one above the other. Or if I move a little closer and say, now you see the little edge between the orange and magenta, it's saying, all right, the left edges of each one are perfectly lined up. So let's say I want that. But also, if I want to line it up to the grid, or I'm sorry, the guide, I can just kind of automatically snap when I get close to that guide. Put this one and snap it to the left and bottom guide. I'll move this one down. It'll snap to the orange rectangle and the left guide. And I'll do the same thing with the green. And then I can also resize the green by clicking on the top square and dragging it up until it hits the guide above it. And so now these are perfectly lined up within this kind of 9-inch area that I've measured out on my artboard. Guides will not be printed. They're not, even though we're looking at them, they're not actual shapes. You will not find them in your layers here. They're just visual guides, literally just guides. So I can turn them off and on by pressing Command:. So I'm holding down Command, pressing colon button. Because sometimes maybe I want to see what it looks like without these lines over my whole page. So let's say I've organized these squares all in the same area, according to the guides, but then I don't want to look at them anymore. I can turn off the guides. Okay, oh yeah, they're all lined up perfectly. I like just the way they are. Okay, so that's how you turn off and on the guides. Any questions about guides?
Do you know where to find smart guides?
Yeah, okay, so, and again, it's unfortunate it's up here. It's cut off of my screen, but you should see where it says like Select, Effect, View, Window, that whole area. Click on View, and then scroll, look down a little further. There's a little section called Smart Guides, and make sure there should be a little check mark beside it. If it doesn't have a check mark, then click on it, and it will turn on the Smart Guides. Got it? Okay. Yep. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to go ahead and delete these objects. I'm going to turn off my guides. Another thing that can also be used actually before I delete them, you can also turn on your grid, which is command comma, or actually not comma, command apostrophe. So if I press command and press apostrophe, I get this grid. And again, it's kind of hard to see on the projector, but you'll get, depending on what your grid settings are in Illustrator, you'll get what looks like graphing paper or something, and you can line things up to the grid. You can also come up here to view and scroll down a little bit more, and it says snap to grid. You can turn snap to grid on, which you may not want it on, because if you may not want things to snap to the grid, so just know how to turn it off if you do turn it on. I'm going to turn it on, and now this rectangle is kind of like snapping perfectly to, zoom in a little bit, to different edges. I know it's super hard to see, but
How far apart are the grid squares?
I'm sorry?
How far apart are the grid squares?
You like the dimensions of the grid? So we can actually change that. They may be different on what my laptop is and what you're looking at. If I come up here, and again, you can't see this, but the Illustrator to the top left, and I click on Preferences, Guides and Grid, then I can customize those settings. So right now when I was making those guides, they were that kind of light blue cyan color. That's where I can change that if I want to. Then under grid, right now it's set to grid line every 1 inch with subdivisions 1/8. So basically it's like 8 inches. And you can't see it on the projector. On mine, the ones that are for 1 inch are a little bit darker. And then the ones that are divided into the 1/8 inches are a little bit lighter. And they will, let's see if I can zoom in even a little bit more. Man, you can just not see it at all. Wow, okay. But just trust me, they correspond to, like, here's 0, here's the 1 inch on the ruler. This line here is a little bit darker, and it corresponds to the dimensions of the ruler as well, okay? Any questions about grids, guides? Okay. And again, I'm going to turn off the grid. That's command apostrophe. All right, so now I'll go ahead and delete these objects. So I'm selecting them, and I'm just pressing delete on my keyboard. Next, we're going to go to the pen tool. So the pen tool looks like one of those old style pens. If I hover over it, it just says pen tool. The keyboard shortcut is P. If I click on it, so right now it's going to be affected by either what I am using with fill or stroke. Right now I still have the green fill color and no stroke. I'm going to change that. I want to have no fill and a green stroke. And I'm going to increase the stroke size so you guys can see it a little bit better. So then here's my pen tool. I'm on layer 1. I'm selected on layer 1. And if I click, it's just made a little dot. And if I move, I'm not holding down. I'm just moving my cursor around. Now it has this little blue line that's kind of following my cursor. It's showing me that if I go ahead and do another click, let's say right here, it just made another point, and it's connecting these 2 points with this green path, this green stroke that is following this path between the 2 points. And after I click that second time, now there's another line. Now I drag this down, I can click again, and then it made a new path, which is the green stroke between these 2 points. Let's say I want to complete this as a triangle. Now I can come back up here to that original point, and it will, if I get close, it will automatically kind of snap to that original point, and then you'll see the cursor change. Right there, it has a little circle beside it, and it highlights that point. Then I can click, and now it's a closed path. Now I just clicked that once. Now that blue line's not following anymore because it closed the path to make this triangle between these 3 points. And again, if I switch between fill and stroke, I can have a solid triangle or triangle out of lines. When I did that though, when I was changing in between them, it got rid of the stroke width, so I'm gonna make it a little bit wider again. Okay, so the pen tool is the tool you'll probably be using the most everywhere in Adobe products. Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. Well, maybe not InDesign. Probably InDesign you'd probably be mostly using type. But we even use a pen tool in animation, film production. It's everywhere. Because with something like the rectangle tool, all you can make is just different size rectangles. With the pen tool, I can click around and make as many points. I'm just clicking and it's just connecting all these different points next to each other. And I can make any shape I want. Okay? Now you can also, the benefit of this is you can also make curved shapes. So if I click and then I make my second point, it looks like, all right, I've just made this line, but I'm holding down, I clicked and I'm holding down, now I move my cursor and it's making this curve. It's kind of stretching out this curve between the 2 points, so it's making a curved path. Okay, so I'm holding down, I let go. Now it's curved between what I told it to, the curve to make between these 2 points, all right? And now that I haven't clicked on the third point yet, so it's automatically making a curved path because of what we call like these handlebars here that are extended from the second point. Well, let's say so if I click now, I can do the same thing and I can kind of change the curve. And let's say I like that, kind of going like an egg shape type thing. But let's pretend, okay, now it's like this curve that's happening this way. Well, maybe I don't want that. Maybe I don't want it to curve this way. Maybe I want this to be straight again. I can come back here to that point I just made, hold down Option, and click on it. You have to hover it, so I'm holding down Option, it gives this kind of triangle, but then I get close to that path, and then all of a sudden the cursor will change. Once it changes, click on that point, and it gets rid of that handlebar, and now it's back to being a straight line. So now I can come back over here, click again, and come back to that original point and close the path, and now I have some sort of Pac-Man-ish looking thing. All right, so with curved and straight paths. Do you guys need me to go over that one more time, or does that make sense? Everybody got that? Okay, all right. So this is how we start working with the pen tool. Now let's talk a little bit more about specifically this project, which we're making labyrinths. I'm going to start simple, and let's say I want to do a labyrinth that is with white lines on a black background. That's when layers will come in, because I need to make the black background on a layer underneath where I start drawing my white lines. All right, so I'm selected on layer 1 over here. I'm going to come back to my rectangle tool. Right, it was on the ellipse tool, so I got hold down. I'm going to select the rectangle tool. And if you remember, I can click and hold and drag, different shape rectangle. Or if I know exactly the size I want, which in this case, I want it to be the whole size of the artboard, which I know the artboard is 11 inches wide by 17 inches high, I can just click once, not hold down, just click once, and it brings up this little rectangle box. And it says width right now, I should have to change it, type in 11 for width, and height 17. I press OK, and it automatically makes the perfectly sized rectangle. Now, of course, I want it to be solid black, so I'm going to swap the fill and stroke. So right now it's solid green. I'm going to come back to the selection tool. First off, I'm going to center it. So I have the smart guides on, and it's snapping to the edges. So now it's perfectly centered. Now I'm going to double click in the fill color box here, and I'm going to change it so I can select the color. I'm going to come down here to black, press OK. Now it's a black background, same size as the artboard. Yeah.
So how did you bring up the size tab again?
So once you're selected on the rectangle tool here, just click once on the artboard.
Okay.
So don't hold down, just click once, and it should pop up the options to type in the size. Did that work?
No.
All right. Let me see.
Maybe not that I'm doing something wrong.
No, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, just you're on the rectangle tool. Just click once. Now you can type it in the width and height.
cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. So I could do that same thing again to fill the second artboard, or I can copy and paste this object. So I'm selecting the object, making sure it's still on layer 1. Command C is copy, or you can come up to Edit, Copy, and then Command V. So it pastes. Command V is paste. I'm pasting that same shape, and I can fit it over the artboard like this. Now both of these are the black backgrounds. I'm actually just going to go ahead and leave one black and one white. All right, so now let's say you've started to put some other shapes on top of your black background. Let's say I made this white rectangle on top of it, but I made the rectangle on layer 1. Well, now if I'm actually going to make a bunch of different shapes, a bunch of different rectangles. I'm just going to do it really quickly. Let's say I don't like these rectangles anymore, and I want to delete them. So if I select, like I'm clicking, I have the selection tool here. If I drag and select them all, and I press delete, it just deleted my background as well. This is why we have the black layer on layer 1, then we can start making these other shapes on layers that are above. And I'll show you where that comes in handy. So now I have to just delete them one by one, which is annoying, it's time consuming. So beside the little eyeball, over here on the Layers tab, beside the eyeball, there's nothing here, but there's a little space where if I hover over it, it says Toggle Lock. If I click on that, then I'll see a little lock symbol pop up beside the eyeball. When I have the lock symbol on, look, I'm clicking over here on the black rectangle, I can't move anymore. That layer is completely locked. I'm clicking, I'm trying to move this, it ain't moving because it's locked. Now, if I select layer 2, and I start making some white rectangles all over it, and I don't like them, then I can select all of them, I can press delete, and it didn't delete the black background because they're on separate layers. The white rectangles were on a layer that's unlocked, and the black background is on a layer that was locked. So when I selected the area, it did not delete because it was locked. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so that can come in a lot of handy, or that can come in handy when you have a lot of shapes and such, which we're gonna be making a lot of lines for these labyrinths. And if you make a mistake and you want to delete a section, but you don't have to worry about like, oh, I don't want to accidentally select the black background and then accidentally delete it, you can just go ahead and put that on its own layer and lock it, and then you don't have to worry about it being accidentally moved or accidentally changing color or being deleted, anything like that, okay? So there's a lot of different ways to make a labyrinth, and I am leaving it a bit open-ended. I am not going to say, you guys have to make your labyrinth exactly this way or that way. We do want to have one that's rectangle, one that's circle. But if you find some interesting ways to kind of create this maze through different shapes, I'm all for it. I'm for experimentation. As long as it makes sense, it's not just like a couple of shapes moved around and it's like, oh yeah, this is a labyrinth. Well, all right, I might not be buying that. Okay, but one way with some of the tools we just looked at to make a labyrinth, I'm gonna turn my grid back on, and I can come back to the pen tool. So you gotta be careful. Right now it's selected with no stroke, just fill. Well, I wanna have a stroke color instead, so I'm gonna swap them. I'm gonna make it, let's say, 10-point stroke. And make sure all my guides are on, okay. So then I can try to maybe line up one line with the pen tool on the 1 inch from the left side. I can click. You also, so then I click and then I move my cursor up and say I want to do an inch right here, and I click and I've just made a white line. And now it's making another one. I have on the Smart Guide, so it's kind of snapping to a straight line. So if I have it close to being straight line, then I can keep kind of going around. And I'm just doing this real fast, real simple. But this is kind of the basics of building these lines up to make these kind of shapes. Now, if you don't have the snapping on your Smart Guides and such, and you accidentally make, let's say you want to have a straight line, but you accidentally make a diagonal line, and you're trying to think, okay, how do I make it like perfectly 90-degree angles? You can hold down Shift. And actually, it snaps to 45. So right now, I'm holding down Shift. When I don't hold down Shift, I can just move the cursor around it. It will make a line, a new point, wherever I want to. If I hold down Shift, right now, it's snapping to like a perfect 45-degree angle or a perfect 90-degree angle and all the way around. So I could just be holding down Shift and like not even thinking. It's like basically locking my pen tool into 90-degree angles. I'm just doing lots of different points and clicking all over the place, okay? I'm just holding down Shift, and it's not allowing me to do anything but 90 degrees. Is that making sense to you guys? Okay? So that's one quick way to start making these lines that form something like a labyrinth. Let's say I don't want to close the shape. Well, if I don't close the shape, I'm trying to how do I get rid of this, red line? Well, you can just come over here, press the selection tool, or just press V. It'll get rid of the pen tool, and then now this shape exists on its own. It's not closed. It just has the start point and end point. Okay. Another option. So I'm going to delete this. Another option is to use the rectangle tool, and I'm gonna draw and stretch out rectangle, maybe do another one, kind of like concentric. I gotta be careful because when I get too close, it's gonna want to bring up the option to do rounded edges, which is, let's see, I don't want that. I can keep rounded edges. Yes. You know, I don't want you to overcomplicate things to where you get in the weeds and it just becomes a mess and you can't get it done. But if you find a certain style, or you want to use diagonal lines or something else, you are welcome to. And they can be different widths. Like that one that kind of has this effect where I almost look kind of 3D. That's fine. Now I just, this is project 1 of a foundations course, so I just don't get, overwhelmed by it. But if you're feeling confident and it's all kind of coming together and making sense, then yeah, go ahead and try other stuff. So I'm just gonna keep making some rectangles. And I'm doing this very sloppily. I'm not kind of measuring them out or anything. I'm just for speed and efficiency, I'm just kind of making them quickly here. So then I'm actually going to stretch these a little more out so I can come back in, kind of resize them. And by the way, I'm clicking on the edge of these rectangles, and this is bringing up the options to resize. Then I can also come over here to the line tool, the line segment tool. If I hover over it, it just looks like a diagonal line. And then I can start like connecting some of these. So again, I have the smart guides on, so that's going to come in handy. I can just start. Again, so if I'm not holding shift, I can just make a line any way I want. But if I hold down shift, it'll make like 90-degree angles. And I can start like connecting some of these. That's another way to start building these ins and outs of the labyrinth. All right, so I'm just connecting with a line tool. You can also do this with a pen tool. It doesn't have to use the line tool. I can just click, hold shift, click. But then I have to press V and then P again because it's not when it closes a path. So that's why in this case, instead of pressing V then P, it's probably faster just to use the line tool. So you see, I'm just connecting some of these. But then you might start asking, all right, well, you've just made a bunch of like other rectangles, almost like a window pane or something. It's not an actual labyrinth because all the paths are closed off. All right. Here's the next step. On the points and paths, you can anytime add more points on a path that already exists. Then, once you add a point, you can separate it and delete a segment. And I'll show you what that looks like. So right now, all of these rectangles and all these lines, they're just 2 points connected by a path in between the 2 points. If I come back over here to my pen tool, but I hold down again, so instead of pen tool, there's add anchor point tool. I click on that. Then it looks a little different. It looks like the pen tool, but there's this little plus sign beside it. Then if I come over to, let's try this one. and I click once, and I have to do it just right on the path. If I'm a little bit off, it won't do it. So I just clicked, and it made a new little square here. That is a new point on that path. So I'll come back over a little ways and do it. Let me zoom in actually. All right, so here's the path for this rectangle. I've just made this little point here, this shown by this red square. I come back over. I'm trying to keep it about the same width as this, so come back over around about here, make another one. So now there's 2 points, 2 added points on this path. Now, if I can press A on my keyboard or come to the Direct Selection tool. Click on that. It looks the same as the Selection tool, but it's filled that light gray. Then I can come and click directly on one of these points. Okay. Then up here, you'll see there should be, next to it says anchors. There's this one where you can remove a point. Well, we don't want to remove it. We just added it for a reason. And a little further over, you'll see these things are like little tiny scissors. And I hover over, it says cut path at selected anchor points. I'm going to click on that because I already have this selected. I use the direct selection tool to click on this one little square. Now I can press the little cut path. It looks like little scissors. And it just cut this path up. Now, we don't see any difference yet, but just know that now where there was 1 point, now it's been divided into 2 because it's not one solid path, it is now cut. I'm going to do the same thing to this section here, or this point here. I'm clicking on it. So I selected this 1 point, come up here to the cut path with the little scissors, press that again, it just cut it. And now this little path here is separated, it has been cut out from the rest of the rectangle. So now when I click on it, so I've clicked on that path, notice it's just the path between those 2 cut points. If I click over here, it's the whole rectangle minus that point that was cut out. I'm going to come back, click on this area, then I press delete, and now it's open. This same process can be used for the paths you make with a pen tool. So you don't have to do the rectangles this way. You can, but if you say it's easier, and I tend to think it is easier, quicker to use the pen tool. If you do that, you can cut out sections the exact same way. So that applies both to rectangle tool, pen tool, anything that uses paths, which is basically everything in Illustrator. Okay. Any other questions before we go to the circle? Okay, great. So this process here that we use for the rectangle is probably going to be the best one for creating the circles. All right, so on the second artboard, I'm going to click rectangle tool. I'm going to hold down so I can select the ellipse tool. I'm going to click once so that I can get the options to change the size. I don't want the circle to go all the way to the edge, so I don't want it to be exactly 11 inches. I'll just go ahead and do 10. And then 10 height as well, so it's a perfect circle, 10 inches wide, 10 inches high. Press OK. This one, we're not using the black background, so I'm going to change the stroke color to black. Click on the selection tool so I can start moving it around. Okay. Now, for this type of thing, I'm probably going to do the concentric circles. I think that's probably going to be the easiest in working with things that are not at right angles. So to do that, one way, an easy way that I like to do is, so I've selected, I have the selection tool, I've clicked on this circle I've just made. Then if I hold down the Option key, and I click on it, I move it, it duplicates the circle. All right, let me try that one more time, but I want to do concentric. I don't want to just copy and move it. Wait, let me, actually, no, to get them centered, we're going to copy and paste it instead. All right, so I've selected it. I'm going to press Command-C to copy. And then I want to paste it exactly in place. I don't want to be pasted like over here to the side or above or below. I want it to be exactly centered. So I'm going to, instead of just pressing Command-V, I'm going to press Command-Shift-V. All right, so it pasted it directly in place. We can't see it because it's directly above the exact same spot as the first circle. But now with the, we can resize it with the bounding box, the little square on the, any of the corners. But notice if I click and I start resizing it, well, it doesn't do it. First off, it's not, I can accidentally change the shape of it. And second, it's resizing it like to the corner. All right, so we don't want that. If, in this case, we want concentric circles, so instead of just clicking and dragging, we're gonna click, we're gonna hold down Option, and notice it's now sizing towards the center. Now, of course, it can still be stretched, so we don't want it to stretch. So while I'm holding Option, I'm also going to hold down Shift. When I'm holding Shift, it will scale it proportionally as a perfect circle. So now I can let go, and I have another ring inside. Now I can press Command-Shift-V again. I've just made another circle. I'm going to do the same process. Click, drag, Option, Shift, holding down, and second or third circle, I mean. Same process, Command-Shift-V, clicking, holding on Shift and Option. Basically make like a target type shape. I'm just going to repeat this. So basically it's, as many levels as I want. All right. Okay, so now I have a concentric circles. Now I'm going to start basically doing that exact same process where I can click on the line tool and start drawing these kind of borders in between. And I can do this as much as I want. And then same thing, I'll just go over it again because I know it's kind of a little bit intricate process. If I want to cut out a section of the labyrinth, I'm going to click on, let's say, this circle here. And even though it's a circle, it's a curved path. It's not a straight path like last time. It works the exact same way. All right, so I've clicked on the circle. I see the red path of the circle here. I'm going to come over to my pen tool, make sure it's on the Add Anchor Point tool, which is below the pen tool, or you can just press plus. Then I'm going to click on the stroke, that red path, and then come over, click again. I've just made these 2 points. Then I can press A, or I can click on Direct Selection tool. I'm going to zoom into it. The first path I made, I'm clicking directly on that point. and then come up to the little scissors, the cut path, cutting it. Now I'm coming back over, clicking on the second point I made, cutting that one. Now, so I've deselected, I just clicked in a blank area, so I've deselected everything. Now I can come back into the section in the middle of, right on that stroke, click on it. So now it's just that little piece in between everything else. And I press delete, and it opened it up. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The circles, do they have 4 anchor points already there, or are those?
The circles are made up of 4 anchor points, yes.
So if you try and do it in between one of those, you'll have to select that anchor point too.
You're talking about like if you want an open spot on like the top, bottom, left, or right? Yeah, so if you do that, so I'll do it for the top one. So here's the anchor point right there in the center. I'm going to go into the direct selection tool. I can see it. It's automatically made to make the shape of a circle. If I do that same thing where I make a point here and I do it on, so it's left of that point, and I do one on the right, then I don't actually have to worry about that one in the middle, because I can still cut out both of those. And so I'm cutting them. Now, even though there is an extra point in the middle, if I press delete, it's just, gonna delete. I had to press delete twice, but it's still gonna delete that whole section in between those cut points. Yeah. Going to work on saving and exporting our labyrinths for PDFs for submission to Canvas. So right now I have both of my artboards with these 2 example labyrinths that I just started working on. After I'm done, I can press Command S or come up to File and press Save. It's marked gray right now because this project is already saved on my computer. Once you do that, it might ask you for where you want to save the Illustrator file, which is a .ai file, and you will go ahead and put the Illustrator file in your project files folder. Okay. Now we will work on saving each of these artboards as their own separate PDFs. To do that, we're going to go up through File and come down to Save a Copy. So when I click on Save a Copy, I can rename, I'll say Labyrinth 1, and then my name. This is just an example of what you can name your file. Right now it's pointing towards the project files folder. I don't want to save it in project files. I can click on here, come back to project 1, and with the folders I have made in here, I can see one that says exports. I click on exports. I already did a test of the PDF, so that's why I see 2 PDFs in here. I might title this one, I'm going to put Rectangular Labyrinth 1 Ryan Meyer. So right now it's automatically trying to save as an Adobe Illustrator or AI file. I want to change that. I'm going to click on this and change it to PDF, Adobe PDF. When I click on that, it's going to ask me, it's probably going to have it set on all for you. It's asking which artboards I want to export. So instead of all, I'm going to do one at a time. So I'm going to press range. I'm going to type in 1. So this is just going to export the first artboard, and then press save. And then you can keep these settings the same and press save PDF. And it brings up what I just saved in Adobe Acrobat, which is PDF viewer. So I'll click out of that. I'll do this one more time with the second artboard. So I'm coming up to File, Save a Copy, change this to PDF. We'll change this to Circular Labyrinth Brian Meyer. Get rid of it all. It put the word copy in there, so I'm going to take that out. It's directed toward the project files, but again, I'm going to change them and click on exports. And this time, range we want artboard 2, so I'm going to take out the 1. I'm going to replace it with 2, so it's just exporting artboard 2. Press save and save PDF. And here's the second one. When I go to my folder here, I can see both of those files I exported along with 2 earlier test files automatically saved in my exports folder. Then you can upload the PDFs to Canvas for the submission.